Right, how are you? Are you recording this? Yeah.
Yeah, with permission to be on there.
Oh, absolutely not.
I've had the privilege of working with slides.
Once we get started, yeah. Yeah, then we can put the lights on, yeah. I don't want them.
Well, welcome everyone. It's great to see so many people. And if you think you've come out on a cold, damp evening, just think of Gill diving off the coast of Britain on a gloomy winter's night. But we'll talk more about that in a minute. So many of us will be delighted to have one string to our bow. But Gill has got many. She's going to tell you all about starting in the police force, starting as a diver, being the first woman to lead a group of divers in the UK and then internationally. She's going to talk about the orphanage that she helped put together out in Thailand after the tsunami. She's not going to tell you what an amazing artist she is, both a photographer and a miniature artist. And she probably won't tell you that she's had miniatures approved by the Royal Society. So this is not trivial. Gill, we're in awe, and over to you.
Sit down. Very much for inviting me here tonight, and thank you for coming along. So many faces and quite a few familiar ones as well. My story will be right from the start, really, all the way through to the finish, and about getting into the police, and as Keith said, following on through into diving, and then specialist search and major disaster recovery, leading on to the tsunami. If at any time any of you have got a question, just fire away, because it'll be relevant at the time, and I can answer it as best I can then as well. If I can't answer it, I'll tell a lie. But we'll get started. I grew up on a council estate in Oxford, and my dad ran a boys' club, and so I spent every summer playing cricket, every winter playing football. And I loved any type of sport, and used to run everywhere, run to school, run home from school, and I soon became the school cross-country champion. And when I got to about 15, we did what was called work experience at school, where you had an opportunity to sign up for either a bank or a vet or you name it, a business of some sort, to spend a week and to learn the ropes, basically, to see if that's what you wanted to do when you left school. And when it came to me being offered anything to do, all that was left was the local police station. And I realise now that none of my friends wanted it because they'd all been in trouble with the police. And so I spent a week at the local police station in Cowley in Oxford, and I absolutely loved it. And I thought, this is exactly what I want to do, which broke my art teacher's heart because he wanted me to go to university to study art. And so he crammed me for 3 months through my A-levels in art, so that I could get there and get my A-level and then join the police. And I joined the police cadets in 1978, where I spent 2 wonderful years just charging about the countryside, having adventures, and actually getting paid a little bit for it as well, which was wonderful. Can you all hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
Good.
Slightly closer to my
Sorry?
microphone slightly closer.
I've got my
Oh,
phone there. Yeah.
okay.
I think the only reason I got into the police cadets was the sergeant that came to interview me for the job, because they did that in those days in 1978, was in charge of the police cross-country team. And he found out that I was the school cross-country champion, and that was that. And so you can imagine every other week I was going off representing the force as a cross-country runner as well. And then in 1980, I had to sadly leave the cadets, and I joined as a regular police constable. Now I've just got to get this right, so bear with me. And that was me on day one at the age of 18 and a half. And in those days, police women wore skirts, and we all wore tunics and everything. You know, it's all very smart. I was very, very proud and absolutely loved doing what I was doing at the time. I also met my husband on that very first day because we joined the police together, Ian, in the corner there. And we ended up being posted just down the road from each other, which was convenient. So he wasn't my husband then, but we got to know each other. So and then we got married in '83, and round about 1985, I began to think there must be something in the police that I would enjoy doing that doesn't give me confrontation, because I've learned that I hated confrontation with violence and unpredictable, situations. And I'd had a couple of scares with. I was based in Marlow, which is quite a rural town in Buckinghamshire, and I'd had a couple of scares where I was in the middle of the Chiltern Hills and being threatened. I was on my own at night on duty and being threatened by a drunken guy who was driving a JCB rather erratically, smashing into cars along the A40 before ending up where I was in the middle of nowhere, coming to get his car that had gone into a ditch. And he was quite aggressive towards me, and his friend that was with him didn't help. And the first person to rescue me on the scene was Ian, because he was the only one that knew where I was. And I thought I was so vulnerable. And I don't think in this day and age you would ever get a policewoman or policeman on their own at night in the middle of nowhere. You know, you're always doubled up anyway now. So I thought, what am I going to do that doesn't give me that sort of confrontation with violence? And I didn't like arguing. I argued with Ian, but that's okay, it's my husband, but I didn't like arguments and abuse and what have you. And so I thought, my first thought was the horse section, because I love animals and I loved horses. I had my own horse. And then I thought, that was based up in Milton Keynes, and I really didn't want to move to Milton Keynes. So I thought, what about the diving team? Because I love swimming, I loved being outdoors, and with dead bodies, there's no confrontation. And then I thought, well, actually, I don't actually want to be underwater in the dark, no visibility, bumping into a dead body. So I thought, no, I can't do that. So I applied for the boat section, and the boat section, the marine section, was we had 3 boats that patrolled the length of the River Thames that we covered, non-tidal Thames, which is 106 miles, and got accepted for the boat section. And on day 1 on the boat section, we went for a life-saving training session in the local swimming pool, and the police divers were there, and they said, "Do you want to go with the equipment?" I went, "Yeah, all right then." and went underwater, and I was in a swimming pool, but I just, this is amazing, and I just love it, and I thought, I want to do it, and there was still a vacancy coming up, and so I thought, I've just got to apply for this job, and I applied for it and got it, and then in those days, before you went off to police diver training school, which was a proper commercial training school run by the police. There were two of them in the UK, one in Northumbria, one in Strathclyde. They were allowed to put you in the water before you went on your course. And I'd never dived in my life, apart from that one time in the swimming pool. And my very first dive ever was, I was playing flood off the back of a police boat looking for a car, and I was just bouncing all over the place. I didn't know whether I was on my head, on my back, you name it. I didn't know where I was. But they dragged me out of the water, and I just had a great big grin on my face. I just loved it. And then my second dive was at 35 metres in a reservoir looking for a car with an experienced diver. And again came out, big smile on my face. The third time I went in, I was in a weir on my own. And it was a training dive, and the current was so strong it sucked my fins off my feet, and we never found them. And my fourth dive, this is all before I'd been taught how to dive properly. They can't do that these days, I can assure you, but you could in those. My fourth dive was on the bottom of the River Thames at Wallingford, looking for a possible dead body, because there'd been an explosion on a tripping boat. And they didn't know whether anybody had gone into the water as a result of the explosion. And it was in flood again. And I'd been shown how to do the search patterns that we use to look for bodies, and searched up and down, and didn't find anything, but came out just absolutely loving it. And all the time I could see my sergeant grimacing, really, because they really didn't want a woman on the team, because there'd never been a woman on the team, there'd never been a woman in police diving, full stop. And it just wasn't the thing to do, it was a man's world. And what were they going to do? Where would I get changed? Where would I go to the toilet? There's only a bucket in the back of the lorry. Well, I can pee into a bucket as well as any man, you know. And I soon found that out. And once you've seen one backside, you've seen them all, you know, so getting changed. And that was just mine, you know. But it didn't, to me, it didn't matter. For me, it was their problem, not my problem. And come when was this, 87, March 87, I went up to Sunderland, which was where the original police dive school was, and I spent 8 weeks learning to dive, but most importantly, learning to be a police officer underwater. And so by that, I mean, you are an extension of the police on land. You go down and you are looking for clues, you are looking for evidence, you are looking for property, you're looking for bodies, you name it. But yet to do that, you need to learn all of the search patterns, all of the, in those days it was rope signals, there was no communications, very, very basic diving equipment. And so for 8 weeks you were getting deeper and deeper and deeper and given more and more difficult tasks. My first day, when I walked into the classroom up in Sunderland, the sergeant said, "This isn't the place for women." And I love people when they do that. It's just like, yeah, come on in, you know. And by the end of it, I'd finished top of the course and beat the 7 guys that were also on the course with me. The following week, on the front page of the Daily Mail, there's this headline, "Gill bubbles to the top." Cheesy me with a big cheesy grin on my face. So that was that. And then for the next sort of 2 to 3 years, I'm with my team. There's only 8 of us on the team, and so it's a very, very small team, very, very expensive team, because the equipment is very expensive, the training is very expensive, and there's lots and lots of courses and lots of refresher courses. But I was just learning the ropes, really, and getting thrown into the water as much as possible so that I could learn the job. And with a police diving team, you know, obviously everybody thinks that you're looking just for bodies. Well, you are. That's the main bread and butter of your job, is looking for bodies, whether it's murder, suicide, missing person, accident. If there's a possibility they've gone into the water, we would be the people that would get back to search for them. We also look for weapons that have been used in robberies, that sort of thing, stolen property. Most of this stuff you would find under bridges because most escape routes were over bridges, and the baddies would just dump it over the bridge and think it would never be found again. You know, if you dive under any bridge on the River Thames, it's like in Aladdin's cave. You know, I mean, the first time I dived under a bridge in a little village called Iffley, I went down, and what we'd do, if you found any coins, you'd use them for the card game over lunch, you know, you know. And I was going down, and I was finding coins and more coins. I'd stuffed it all down my gloves, and I had to come out and empty my gloves of all these coins, and then I found more, and then silver cutlery and jewellery, and literally it was just where burglars, thieves had just dumped everything really, and we were just recovering loads of stuff for ages. One of my best finds was just on the outlet pipes of Didcot Power Station, which every 10 minutes the water turned bright pink and warm, and it's the only time I've ever had a warm dive in the Thames. And I was looking for a car. The tracks had been seen down to the water's edge, so we're presuming a car has gone into the water. And so the visibility was horrendous, but pink horrendous every 10 minutes. And after about 20 minutes or so, I found the car. And so while I was waiting for the recovery truck to come so I could connect the chains to put around the wheels, I decided just to have a little swim up and down the edge just to see if there's anything down there. And I came across this big sort of case, if you like. I couldn't see what it was because there was no visibility. And I put my hands underneath, lifted it up on the side, and then we had communications. And so I could call up and say, pull me up, pull me up. And I managed to sort of drop it onto the side, and it split open. It was just full of coins. And when it was counted, there was over £10,000 worth of coins in there. Ian was saying, why don't you just mark the spot? You can't do that. Well, there's a police officer. So yeah, that was good. And that went to Treasure Trove. I never saw the benefits of that ever, sadly. And I mean, we were involved in lots and lots of, every single day it was diving, and no matter what the weather, you were in the water. And of course, at this time of year, as Keith said, it's really cold, and the thing that really gets cold is your hands. And you're wearing gloves, thick neoprene gloves. But when you're doing a very, very slow search for a small knife or a small handgun or even a ring or a bullet casing, it can get as small as that. You're getting cold really, really quickly, and after about 20 minutes, your hands are just like blocks of ice completely. And so you're literally in and out of the water after about 25 minutes just to pour hot water into your gloves, ready to go back in again. And so you're learning really, really fine search techniques, but literally blindfold. So it's all by touch. When you got visibility, it was just like, wow, I can see, and it makes your job so much easier. But to be quite honest, most of us preferred to dive blind, because it meant that you all your senses were in your fingertips, and you learnt what a gun felt like the moment you touched it. You learnt what a knife felt like. When you first started, you find a bag of leaves that had been thrown into the water, and you thought every bag of leaves was a body, or every cushion was a body, but you soon learnt what things felt like. And I still hated the thought of bumping into a body in ill visibility, and so I would go down the search pattern with this leg out in front of me, and I found all my bodies in 24 years with my right leg. My foot through my fin knew what bodies felt like through all that rubber. So I never had to actually run into one. And so that went on, and I then became a dive supervisor, which meant I could then organise diving operations. Again, at that time, I was the only woman in the country doing that. And then in 1994, I hated police law. I really hate studying police law. It's the most boring subject. Give me anything to do with diving and I'll study it. But I hate police law, and I decided I would start studying for the sergeant's exam. And so in between all of, in between, let me just get this right. Where's this going to go? Oh, help them. Hold on. Oh, sorry. Oh, right, okay. Has this gone to sleep? Will it go if I press N?
There we go.
Okay. So this, have I broken it? So this is the sort of thing like, this is what I looked like when I was in the water. You could never tell who it was. Lots of equipment on your back, and it was all, you had to be very, very sort of safety conscious as well. We are heavily governed by the Health and Safety Executive. Diving under ice, it didn't matter what the conditions were, we had to get in. If we had to look, this was looking for a knife that had been used in a murder, and we found it. It was in Bedford. We actually covered most of the southeast of England. This was up in Banbury, in the floods at Banbury, and these were luxury flats. And this couple were being rescued by myself and Martin of my team, and they were singing sea shanties as we were pulling them along. Yeah, they literally just lost everything, in a flat. That was on the front page of the Times and used by one of the major insurance companies for years. This is inside a sort of half-sunken barge looking for a telephone, a mobile phone, that would prove whether or not this particular villain was involved in a particular job. I miraculously passed my sergeant's exam, and I don't know how I did it. I must have cheated, but I passed it and had to do 2 years off back out on the streets, which I hated. Again, I had the confrontation thing, and then as my 2 years probation as a sergeant came up, the sergeant on the diving team at that time said, "I'm coming off the team. The vacancy will be available." And it just slotted in with me finishing my 2 years. So I applied for the job and I got it. And immediately I was put under pressure because the police were trying to cut back on expensive small units. And so we had to justify our existence even more. So I started to look at other things we could do that would either involve our breathing apparatus or our search skills or anything else really. So we started doing rope access. This was mainly for recovering people, suicide victims that hung themselves from buildings or trees or bridges, so that we could recover them with dignity and keep everything intact, all the evidence. We also used it for security searches on the sides of high buildings and under bridges. We did all the confined space security work. So before, for instance, Royal Ascot, we had 9 miles of sewers to search, but the royal family and the military would go over on a daily basis to get to the racecourse. And so, anyone that was deemed to be a terrorist target, or a threat against them, if they went anywhere, we would have to search below ground. And so we used the breathing apparatus there. And then we were also used for decomposing bodies on land. So these were bodies that were in buildings that had been there for a number of weeks or even for a short time, but with the heating on, and they're going to meltdown. And so the undertakers would go in, the investigating officers would go in, and so we would go in with lightweight breathing apparatus on and membrane dry suits, which were easy to disinfect. Which made the job a lot easier, and it just meant that we could recover those poor souls, again, with dignity. And that was probably the worst part of the job, because the underwater search side of it was just a joy, it really was. And always unpleasant, but always interesting. The bodies we were getting on land were pretty unpleasant to see. One I had, an old man had died 5 weeks before, and as I went to put him into the body bag, I could see his chest going, and his pacemaker, even though the pacemaker was still beating. The guy was well and truly dead with maggots everywhere, but his little chest was, and I looked at my colleague and said, well, I'm not going to give him the kiss of life. And then in 1999...
Good decision. Good decision.
Yeah. In 1999, I spoke to our emergency planning officer and said, what would happen if a jumbo jet came down in our area, because we backed onto Heathrow, and they said, oh, your team will come get them. And I said, yeah, but there's only 8 of us, and that's like, you know, there could be 400 or 500 people on this plane. And so at exactly the same time, literally, my job has all, my career has always been good timing. I was invited by Hertfordshire Police to major disaster body recovery course. And this was dealing with plane crashes, train crashes. And so as a result of that course, I got 90 officers trained up in Thames Valley to deal with major disasters, where there was either multiple fatalities or multiple body parts. So after the first course where I trained up 20 people, we got called to immediately, within 24 hours, got called to a head-on car crash in Wokingham Town Centre. Both vehicles burst into flames and all 4 people were killed, but the bodies were fragmented and burnt. So not only did we have the problem of getting dead bodies from a burnt vehicle, but we had to get all the pieces as well and bag them all up and pop them. We used all the proper paperwork as if we were dealing with a major incident. And actually the pathologists loved it because they could see exactly where each body part was recovered from, and it made their job a lot easier. And then after the second course, within 24 hours again, I got called to say, can you go to Lambourne Downs, way up above in Berkshire, where the racehorses are and everything, to a little forest. And a light aircraft had come down with 4 people in it, including a 10-year-old girl. And it was a flight paid for by her granddad for her birthday. And she was on the flight with her dad and her uncle and the pilot. And something went wrong in flight and it just plummeted to the ground. So there were 4 people and 92 body parts. And so you can imagine, and they were hanging from trees, they were everywhere. And so you had to treat every single body part, whether it's the tiniest little piece of skin or a main torso, as a main body part. So it was the same form filling in. It was laborious, hard work. It was snowing. It was horrendous weather. The press were a nightmare because they just thought it was great having all the police tents and everything there. But after 5 days, we'd recovered 92 body parts, and again the pathologist said it's the best recovery he'd dealt with because again he could see where each body part came from, and it made his job easier putting things back together again. Because you've got to bear in mind that if they get one body part wrong with that victim, then there's 2 bodies that have got wrong, if they get them mixed up, and you've got to get them right. And also if there's say like a bombing, that victims do not want to find a part of the terrorist's body in with their loved ones. You've got to make sure that every body part belongs to that body, basically. This was just a quick rundown of my team. We ended up doing chemical, biological, radioactive and nuclear training for major disasters. That was him. That was confined spaces. This was forensic searching, just in crime scenes, fingertip searching. This was diving, me. This was deep water diving. It's called surface supply diving equipment, which allowed you to go beyond 30 metres, where your air is no longer on your back. It's going to fetch you on the surface, which means that you've got a...
Just move it up a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Some people have been difficult to hear.
Technology. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. He was the attendant for everything. This was where we would go and smash doors down on early morning raids and then turn the house over looking for drugs, money, evidence of crimes and things. And rope access. So they were our skills on the team. And that was the team before I left. And then moving on swiftly, 26th of December 2004, I was on Skye. Ian, my husband, had moved up to Skye in 2002, and we lived there for 22 years. But I still had to work down south, so from 2002 to 2010, long distance commuted between Marlow and Buckinghamshire and Skye every 4 weeks. But I was home for Christmas when the tsunami happened, and I thought, there's got to be British people involved here, and I think I'm going to get a phone call. And by 2 days later, I was getting phone calls saying we need a team to go out to Thailand, and there's going to be 15 of you. And so immediately we had to go through. I obviously had to choose the team, but then we had to go through every vaccination known to man. We were like sieves at the end of it, because we had needles going in everywhere, psychological assessments, fitness assessments, you name it. But they did give me like a blank checkbook to go to Cotswold Outdoors and buy most of our equipment, which was really great. I've still got some of it now, so and I was allowed to choose it, but it was fit for the job, And about 6 weeks later, we went out to Thailand to assist with victim identification in Thailand itself. And I think it's a point or not. There were 2 mortuary sites dedicated to the tsunami in Thailand. One was at Khao Lak, which was a monastery that had been given over to the authorities for the bringing of dead bodies, and one was at Mai Khao on Phuket, and that was a purpose-built mortuary flown in by the Norwegians. And we were supposed to be spending our time in Mai Khao, but when we got there, we flew to Phuket. When we got there, we were told that we'd have to spend a couple of days up in Khao Lak to begin with before we relocated down to Mai Khao. And we were going to be there for a month, so we were there for a long time. And I can always remember the very first day we got to, there's the top of a hill just here where you then drop down to Khao Lak, which is a beautiful beach, and just seeing the devastation, which I'll show you the photographs of in a bit. And it was just, we just stopped and looked, and you couldn't believe the scale of what happened. It was unbelievable. And these are just a few of the shots, these are library shots that I've got here, just of the scenes that people were facing when it was happening. And in some places they got hit by 1 wave, in other places they got hit by 2 or 3 waves. And also, depending on where you were, depending on whether or not you got hit by a big wave, you could escape the first wave and get wiped out by an even bigger second wave. And so it was totally unpredictable. And it went for over a mile inland as well. So there was nowhere safe, really, wherever you are. And most of the injuries that we saw on our dead bodies were impact injuries, as you can imagine. They were just being swept into buildings, into vehicles, because everything was on the move and at a rate of knots as well. This guy has got to be the luckiest man alive, because this is a professional photographer who actually survived this shot. So good on him. The immediate aftermath, I must warn you, there will be some photographs with bodies on, but I'll let you know when I come to them, and you can't really see them, but it will give you an idea. When I got there, this is what it was like. This was after a night drinking, badly parked with the team. But no, really, everywhere you went, there were cars parked up, just at obscure angles, on top of roofs, in trees. This is a hotel swimming pool. And you think, where do you start the clear up? But the Thais were amazing, and they were really kicking in straight away and clearing things up. I always remember walking along this beach. We would leave the hotel where we stayed at 5 each morning, and we would finish at 5 each night. And on this particular day, we decided we would walk along this beach, and of course it's just utter devastation. And first of all, you've got things like a police launch that was swept way inland through shopping arcades and hotel gardens and things. And that now forms part of the Tsunami Memorial Museum. And a fishing boat, that was taken in half a mile. And there were two fishing boats brought in. This was the good fishing boat because grandfather and son grabbed hold of the tyre that was on its side, and as it swept past them, they grabbed the tyre, and as it came to rest in this village, it literally placed them down on the ground. A short distance away was the bad fishing boat, which sadly just smashed through people, and killed people. So, and again, these are just hotels. Everywhere you went, there was pictures and reminders that this was very much a human event. And the one thing out of all the time I was out there for 3 months, a month at a time. And the one thing that caught me out was this little teddy bear.
Oh.
And as I'm walking along the beach, and bear in mind, we've been dealing with dead bodies all day long, and we stunk of death. We really stunk of death. And we said, let's just go for a swim in the sea and just get back to the hotel for once, clean and fresh. And as I'm walking along the beach to just dry off in the evening sun, I thought, what's that? And it was this little bunny. Yeah. And I thought, oh my God, that belonged to, someone. And this little teddy bear, I just pulled my eyes out with it, I couldn't help myself. Going on to the bodies now, as I say, we were there for the identification, and very early on, the Thais realised that it was going to be a real major event. And so what they did, they first of all, they called out to the international community all throughout the world, just saying we need help and we need help fast. But in the meantime, to locals, they said if you find a body, put it in a bag, put it in the back of a van, and just take it to one of the two mortuary sites. And so this was what was happening. They were just piling the bodies into vans, and this was the mortuary. And there's over 500 bodies at this point in the mortuary at Khao Lak. And they realised that with the heat and everything, because it was the dry monsoon at Christmas, and the bodies were starting to blow up, there were flies everywhere, and they thought this isn't good. And so they didn't have any way to cover them. They poured ice all over them, which melted just as soon as they hit the ground. And then they tried, they sprayed them with dry ice, just trying to preserve it. And in the end, they thought we've just got to get containers in to refrigerate them, which is what they did. And so both sites were full of containers. What they did do with each body, they gave it a unique reference number. So every single body had a reference number, which stayed with that body throughout the whole of its journey, from being found to being identified and returned to its loved ones or the country of origin from where it came from. This was the monastery, and they had photo boards, and they just took photographs of all of their bodies. And of course, all the victims' loved ones were going along every day. It was terrible to see, just looking at all these dead body photographs to see if they could identify their loved one on photo. I can honestly say to you that no matter what colour you were, what size you were, all these bodies looked the same, whether you were green, brown, red, white, they were all decomposing. They were all black, they were bruised, falling apart, and they all looked the same. There was no way that you could have identified your loved one from any of these photos. So this was Takapar at Khao Lak. This was the monastery that we were working at, and it was a proper working monastery. It was right on the canal. Just before we got there, the refrigeration units, which originally were up against this canal wall, broke down, and of course they went into complete meltdown, which was then leaking into the canal, which was a source of fishing and washing for the locals. It's all quite basic living there, and so the containers had to be emptied and gone through again and sorted out. This was our changing. This was our only place of rest, really. This Coca-Cola tent. And the yard where all the dead bodies were was just here, and you could never really escape death, because the moment you finish work, you go to spend a couple of hours in there working, come out, have a breather, have a drink, and then go back in again. And the moment you came out here, this chimney would light up because a local Thai would have been rescued, it's being cremated, and you were getting covered in ash. So you could never really escape any of that. This was inside, this was going into the site, and the only contamination or decontamination was that little bowl there, you see the little silver bowl, and that's all we had to wash ourselves with, which we just stood in with our boots, shimmied the boots around, and then stripped off your boilers, your sort of forensic suits, and wandering around basically in t-shirts and pants, you know, because that's all you could do. And then put new suits on. This is what the yards looked like. Each container held anything from 60 to 80 bodies. At Takrapar, there were 64 containers, and my cow, there were 82 containers. So a lot of bodies stuffed into these vans. And basically, each day we'd be given a list and told to go through container number, say 1. And we would go there with this list and with all the numbers of the dead bodies that were supposed to be in container 1. And there was a plan on the door which was supposed to show where every body was supposed to be inside that container on the shelves. And 9 times out of 10, that body wasn't where it should have been. And so you're then having to climb through all the dead bodies on the shelves to look for the numbered body that you wanted. And if it was a child, then obviously it was, you know, much, much smaller. And you know, trying to find a small package in amongst all these great big packages was very, very difficult. But once we found the body, we would then double check that the numbers coincided, and it would go through a post-mortem, which isn't like a post-mortem in this country that you or I know. This would be purely forensic, and it was mainly to make sure that these bodies were killed by the tsunami and that they hadn't been shot in the head and then sort of stuffed in with all the others to cover up a crime. Oh, it's not close to me, isn't it? And so, yeah, they had the fingerprints taken. There was a post-mortem where they took measurements, cleaned the body up, looked for marks, scars, tattoos, artificial limbs, pacemakers, anything, because they've all got serial numbers on, and that's a good indication as to where they're from and their identification. And then they would go out to odontology, where they would have all their teeth x-rayed and to see if we can match up with records back home. And this is what it looked like inside the mortuary on a daily basis. And this was Kaulak, Takrapar. If a local had been recovered from Thailand, then the family would get in touch with, once it had been identified, it had to be identified by DNA, dental records, fingerprints, distinct marks and scars, even tattoos, because they stay with the body even though this decomposes. Once they'd been identified on 3 points of identification, then if it was a local, they would be contacted and they would come along and with a card with a number on, and they would collect their body. If it was from a different country, then the embassy from that country would be contacted and they would come and get the body. This family were quite wealthy because they were able to afford their own coffin, but 9 times out of 10 we were providing wooden boxes for the bodies because they were so poor. And it was maybe their 5th or 6th family member that had come to collect. My cow was very, very different on Phuket Island. Purpose-built mortuary site, much, much bigger. And this was the warning on the road. You knew you were getting to this place literally miles before you got there because the stench was horrendous. You could smell rotting flesh all the way along. They'd created a wall of remembrance all the way through up to the gates of the site. And this was so that they put all the countries of the world from where they thought people had gone missing from. And it was so that relatives could come and put cards, flowers. And we tried not to look at them because we were dealing with dead bodies, which you can deal with quite easily. But looking at photographs of people that were healthy and living brings them very much alive again. And so you try not to look at living bodies, you're just dealing with the dead. So very seldom did we go along the wall of remembrance to look for these. This was our changing area. It's a bit like, what's the American thing with the hash? It was like that. There is a clean area and a dirty area in our tent, believe it or not. But there was no respite from heat or anything. The first time I went out there, the site was buzzing with people working on site because we were dealing with new bodies coming in all the time. But by my third trip out there, there was only me and 6 Australians working there and a few Thai soldiers. And so slowly the wildlife was coming back in, and on a daily basis we were kicking these chaps out of where we were working. And of course the Australians, it's like Crocodile Dundee. They were just going along with big knives and it's not fake, is it? You know, but this is the sort of, this is what the mortuary looked like inside there. And you can see it's a very different mortuary. It was much cleaner, much more modern. And on my third trip out there, I was no longer dealing with identification. I was going back as a body release officer. So this was, once the bodies had been identified, I was releasing them to the relatives or the embassies. And originally, when I took over, the Danes, who I took over from, were just keeping the relatives at the door, at the gate, and making them wait and wait and wait until they were ready to deal with them. And I thought, this is wrong. You know, these people have travelled miles and they've come to see their loved ones. And, you know, as soon as I instructed the gate men, look, as soon as anyone turns up for a loved one, you bring them in, you bring them into the canteen, you get them water, you know, let them use the toilet, let them freshen up, whatever. But they're going to be treated properly. It's, you know, they're suffering. And so that we changed the way things were dealt with. And I brought them into this little area where there was a fan that sprayed water, which for me was a saviour, because on a daily basis I was bawling my eyes out with the relatives, and I used to pretend it was just a spray from the fan going around that was dripping down my face. And I got a little Buddha so they could say prayers, and candles, they could light a candle if they wanted tissues, and obviously a store of wooden boxes to put them in. We didn't let them look at the bodies in boxes at all because they didn't resemble their loved ones at all. You know, these people have been they're being identified purely on forensics, not on their looks. And so they would turn up with a photograph of what they, you know, I want to look at my daughter and said, please don't. If you want to, when you leave here, you can, but we suggest you don't. And so we would never let them look at the body in the coffin. And we would do one final check with each body before it left to make sure it was that body. We couldn't risk getting rid of the wrong body to the wrong relatives. And so we were ultra careful as to, you know, making sure that everything was right. And I learned to count in Thai because right up to that point, we were still dealing with unique reference numbers. And so the Thai people were turning up still with a piece of card with a unique reference number. And so I learned to count very badly, I hasten to say. And it used to break the ice because I would say, moon, song, and they go, no, and they would correct me, you know, and it would break the ice, and it would just soften it a bit, you know. But I felt at least they could see I was trying to help them. And then the survivors. While I was out there the first time, I learned of 32 children that had been rescued by a lovely lady called Rajana. And Rajana lived in the slums of Bangkok, and she had never spoken English. She'd never been to school until she was 14. And her auntie ran a charity in Bangkok looking after people in the slums. And she said to Rajana was out of university, she had a little daughter of her own, she was married, and she said, I need you to go to the Khao Thapar area and see if there are any children there that need rescuing, that have got no parents, because even though all of this had happened, there were still paedophiles hanging around. On a nightly basis, you'd see them hanging around the corners and around the bars, because bars were opening up again. And it was pretty sickening to see. And so she wanted to make sure the kids were safe. And so she rescued 32 kids. They were living in this tent. And I got to know Rajana really, really well. And she was a very, very dear friend of mine. And bearing in mind, she had not been educated until she was 14. She ended up getting degrees. She could speak fluent English. Her sense of humour was as good as any of ours. And she left her husband, took her little girl along, and set up base in this tent to look after 32 kids who all called her Mama. and she was their mum, and these kids were traumatised. And before I left on my last night there, of my first tour out there, I said to Rosanna, what is it you want for these kids? And she said, a proper home. And I said, well, if you get me plans and let me know how much it is, I'll try and raise the money. And so in the meantime, I've been raising money with runs up and down the West Highland Way, the Great Glen Way, and I bought a washing machine which actually lasted about 12 years, which was brilliant. And I bought them rice and nappies and milk and all sorts of things for the babies, and just musical instruments, because music was definite therapy for the kids. And that Rosanna sort of landed this on me, saying a house. And so I thought, I came home, spoke to Ian, spoke to my mum and dad and said, I want to raise money. And Rosanna came back and said, it's going to cost about £50,000. And I thought, Christ, I've raised 2,000, I've raised 3,000 here and there, but I've never raised that amount of money. And I said, you know, you're all on board. Everyone's on board basically. And literally within about 3 months, we'd smashed through £50,000. And I phoned up Rosanna, and that was my biggest thrill, saying, you know, you can have your home. Now, unbeknown to me, the Thai Treasury had heard about it, and they said, we'll match whatever you raise. And so we ended up with a house in 2006, worth about 120,000 in total, and there were 32 children living there. And so that was the start of the Bantam Namchai orphanage. And I just, like I am tonight, I just started fundraising. I formed a charity. I don't run the charity anymore, but I formed a charity then called Hands Across the Water, and just started fundraising just to support Rosanna, because she was working her socks off just looking after these kids. And that she used locals that survived in the village where the orphanage was built, gave them employment so they could help build furniture and toys and things for the kids. So they all had an income and they were all part of it. And she built it in the village where the kids came from, because there were survivors there. The kids knew she wanted familiarity and continuity. And their friends that survived with family were still living there as well. And she made she made it very, very clear that whatever the kids in the orphanage got involved in, the kids that lived in the village would also get involved in. So there was never any bad feeling at all. And the kids were all dressed in their finery for the opening. We were guests of honour for it, which was a huge privilege. And we got a tour, you know, the little hands would grab yours and say, we want to show you our bedroom. And they had like bunk beds that they shared, and one little cupboard between two, and there was like one little school uniform hanging up that was immaculate. But they were so proud of it, you know, and they were thrilled to share it with you. And then over the years, it was no longer 32 kids, it went up to 48 kids, then it went up to 64 kids. And these were starting to become children that were nothing to do with the tsunami. They were kids that were from abused backgrounds. The parents were in prison, the parents had died, you name it. They were coming from all walks of life, and some of them were pretty traumatised. And so we started raising more money and helping them where we could, and got them another van. We bought them a couple of vehicles, and Wickham Wanderers sponsored them football shirts, and we'd get every Christmas we'd get this was their little Christmas card to us. And then we were there when this little chap, Tunam, meaning top waterfall, was brought into the orphanage, and basically his mum had said, well, to Rosanna, if you don't take him, I'm going to kill him. And so Rosanna, being the big-hearted lady that she was, she just took him on board. And we got to know Tunam really, really well. Now, the thing with Rosanna is she's very, very sharp, and she's very intelligent, and she quickly realised that kids that lack in one area but excel in another should just focus on that area. Tunam is like a top footballer, and he's now 14, 15, probably a little bit older actually, and he is playing top level football now. You know, she's because he was hopeless at school with maths, reading, but he was a brilliant footballer, and so pushing down that line and doing really, really well. 2009, I said I worked with a team of Australians. He set up a charity in Australia which is still running, and because there were now 64 kids living there, we needed a bigger orphanage. So we did a tour to Thailand, cycle across Thailand with the Australians, which was incredibly hot. And they built the second orphanage, which stands side by side with the first orphanage. So it became girls in one, boys in the other, really. And it went up from 64 to 72 kids to 84. And I think the most that Regina ever had there was like 110 kids, but it was really, really packed. It stands at the moment at about 80,000. And then in 2009, just before I retired from the police, I conned a load of my colleagues to cycle from Skye to Marlow to raise money. Told them there were no hills. And so day one was beautiful. Day 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 was like hell on earth. Ian's never forgiven me ever. It never stopped raining, it never stopped wind in your face. We were on to cycle down hills. It was horrendous. And people coming uphill were cycling faster than we were trying to cycle down hills. But we raised 30,000 on that one and built accommodation for staff so that they could stay there. And they rely a lot on volunteers as well, so it's also volunteer accommodation, so they were on site. And also in 2000, sorry, that was lying here, that was 2000, and was that 2007 or 2009?
It's out of my mind, it's so awful.
But I can't think where it was now, 2000, it must have been 2007, sorry. I was awarded the Chivalry Award by the 3 High Sheriffs of Berkshire, Buckinghamshire and Oxford for my work that I did as a policewoman in police diving in a male-orientated sort of department, but also for my charity work for all that I did for the kids, which was a huge privilege for me. And my mum and dad came down, and my dad was just so proud, and within 5 days he had died suddenly. So that's the last photograph of my dad. And so that was such a proud day for me to have him there, to know that he felt so proud of me. And literally 2 weeks after my dad died, a letter came through the post, and I thought it was a speeding ticket, because it had official documentation on, and sort of prints on the outside, and I just put it to one side. I'd been speeding down the M4 one day, so I was coming home from work, and anyway, after about 3 or 4 days, I thought I better open that envelope, and I opened it, and it was to say I'd been awarded the Queen's Police Medal, and I was to go to Buckingham Palace, and it was bittersweet. It was really bittersweet because my dad would love that as well, but it was there in spirit. So that was me with Prince Charles, and he's not that tall, he was on a diet. Because before you go in, they give you a real briefing, and they say, do not stand on the dais with him, he's got to be taller than you. And of course you have to go out there, and they brief you, and you have to practice it, you have to do so many steps out, and you're called forward, and then you turn towards him, and you have to do a little semi-curtsy, and of course I was just like all over the blooming place. And I looked up, and Prince Charles was looking at me, and I thought, oh, your eyes are beautiful. Sparkly eyes. And only a few weeks before, I've heard that Joe Cocker, who is one of my favourite singers, had also been awarded, I think it was an MD or MD, for his services to music and charity. And I thought, oh, I hope Joe's there. And when as we were going through the gate to be checked in at Buckingham Palace, the guards and the gatekeeper said, oh, you're just behind Joe Cocker. Yes! And we went inside, and of course there's all these people milling about, and Ryan Giggs, the footballer, of himself walking around, and I didn't want to speak to him, I said, and there he was, all on his own. I thought, if I don't say something, I'm going to kick myself forevermore. So I wandered over, and I said, hello Joe, you don't know me, but I've always been a great fan of yours, and I just want to congratulate you. do you know, he was so lovely, so lovely. And for me, it was like the highlight of the so that was lovely. And then one of the highlights for the kids was to come over to Skye. And what we'd do every year, we'd raise money and get 5 or 6 of the orphans over to Skye, where we lived at the time. And Rajana loved it because she said, 3 months before, she would announce to the kids that there was going to be a trip to Skye, and they all started behaving. And so she loved those 3 months where every kid did exactly as they're told, they did all their duties, you know, homework, you name it, good at school, and then she'd have to choose the 5 or 6 that come over. And they just loved it, and the locals loved them, and the people on the orphanage were so generous and raised an awful lot of money for them as well, because we get them involved, and they'd be like, this was like a fusion of Polly and Thai dancing, which you know, they were outside, the locals were outside dancing in the car park, and so many of them. But we get to lend them scarves and hats and everything, because they, you know, just didn't have that sort of clothing. But it was lovely to see these little Thai creatures wandering along with their outfits on. And they just loved it, and Roshana absolutely adored it over here. And then they said, Kunju, we want snow. This was in May, and I thought, where can I find snow? And I knew that above the top of the gondola station at the Nevis range, there was a football pitch size bit of snow, and we got there, and it was still there, it's pretty cold. And I said, right, do not roll in it, do not lie down in it, because you'll get so cold. Couldn't you be okay? Are we okay? And the next thing they're lying in it, sliding in it, within 5 minutes, couldn't you be so cold? And so I was taking me a bit of hot chocolate, but they loved it. And of course, after that, every time we had a group over, couldn't you, we want snow? Where am I going to find snow? You know, I had to think ahead all the time. But they just loved coming over, they really did, and it was an absolute joy. And the house was chaos. The very first trip, we tried to spread them out through a few of the houses, and Oshan said, no, all girls, all boys. And they all stayed in our house, and it was just chaos, complete chaos. The dog loved it. The dog disappeared because it was just following the kids all the time. And each time they left, me and Ian would sit there, oh, it's so cool. We really missed them. It was wonderful. And then I organised a couple of cycle rides across Thailand for some British friends. Again, I told them no hills, and it wasn't too hot. It was really boiling. So these are just locals from Skye actually that joined us, and you always end up at the orphanage, and the kids would come with ice towels, thank God. They'd always put on a show for us, which was wonderful. This little lad, Farpet, he lost his parents, he's got a sister, and so he was rescued by Rajana, and he speaks fluent English, and lovely, intelligent boy, really lovely. And these are just a few shots. This is Tiger, and dear Tiger was brought in at the age of 3, covered in cigarette burns, and his mother had called him, excuse the language, Buck, that was his name. And so they all have nicknames, so he became Tiger. He has got learning difficulties, but he's a brilliant dancer. And again, Rajana straight in identified this. This is Tiger, lovely little boy, and he's terribly scarred from abuse. And he's she's pushing him down the route of music and dance and theatre. This is how she operated. And then I did another cycle ride for more mugs, and got that sorted. And again, this was us with all the kids at the finish. And this time we built a hydroponics unit so they could fast produce food for their meals and things. So that's still working really, really well. We also built a rest room for the babies and toddlers so that they could be put down in the afternoon and not be disturbed by the older kids. So that works really, that works really, really well. But they're lovely, they're just delightful kids. That's Farpet, came to meet us and cycle in with us, and little Tiger again. And this is Tsunami getting older. And then going back a few years, 2007, Roshana suffered from breast cancer, and that's why we got on mastectomy. And she wore silicone, artificial boobs, if you like. And she never made a fuss about it. She soldiered on with everything, and made a joke of most things. You know, she went swimming with the kids one day, and they go, "Mama, your boobies, your boobies." And another time, she had left one of the little ones on the bed. She'd gone into the shower, taken everything off. When she came back, the little one had eaten one of the boobs. And so she had to go to hospital to make sure she was going to be all right. But in 2016, when she was on Sky, she was complaining, 2015, so she complained of pain in her back. And eventually it turned out that she got secondary cancer in her back, spine and everything, and kidneys. And I spent an awful lot of time with her in 2016, 2017, just helping her at the orphanage. And the older kids, this is gone. He lost his mum, and Dad remarried. And first of all, when parents remarry over there, the new wife always gets rid of the children. But his mum gave birth to his sister following the wave, and then she died from infection because of the wave, and so the little one was brought up in the orphanage, was gone. And we sponsored him through university. He's a fantastic musician. We know the Sky a number of times. This is Sky. Again, he was another rescue abandoned baby found in a dustbin. This is Snow, and little Snow, her story is unbelievable. And basically, she was found head first stuffed down a toilet. And I'll show you Sky a little bit later. This is Roshana. This is the year she died, 2017, and she, even when she was really, really ill, she still put the kids first. She was still their mama, And she shaved her head. She became a nun for a few months, because by giving yourself to God, it meant that you would then become, in their Buddhist belief, you'd become their right hand person, if you like. She was prepared to go up to God. And while I was there with her, she had asked me to speak to the kids and tell them that she was going to die. She was going to die. She was terminal. And first of all, I spoke to the staff, because they were all living in hope that a miracle would happen and that she would be rescued, but that wasn't the case. So I spoke to the staff, and then she said, "Will you speak to the children?" And at that time I had 52 brown eyes, 50 pairs of brown eyes, all looking at me while I told them that Mama was going to die. And it was just awful. And I was really, really good. And I felt really strong while I was giving to them, because I was doing it for Roshana. And then just at the end, I caught Pet, the little boy that I'd said about, who could speak beautiful English, caught his eye, and he just nodded at me. And I lost it, and he came over to me, gave me a very big hug, and he says, it's okay. And I thought, I'm supposed to be comforting you. And here he was, this little lad, just wrapping his arms around me and comforting me. And I got the call on Christmas Eve 2017, and she fought, and then she thought, I'm not going to die, I'm not going to let cancer kill me, I'm going to do it my way. And so she came off all of the medication, all of the oxygen, everything, and she just passed away peacefully with her family around her. And so she did it her way with dignity, bless her. And she was and still is the most inspirational lady I've ever met. A dear friend who I miss terribly. But all that time, she was training up one of the original Tsunami orphans called Gill, who again had lost his family, and she put him through university, and he got a law degree, got a child psychology degree, and she was teaching him the ins and outs and ropes of running the orphanage at the age of about 23, 24 at the time. And so it was then going to be in his hands, so we helped him an awful lot, just finding his feet. 2018, we got called, we got invited out for the memorial, which is 100 days after the death of someone. And so this is for Roshana, and this is with, we were with Roshana's daughter, Tom Baum, and her sister. and a big celebration, and they've created a bust of Gianna, and it was a very, very incredibly moving ceremony, but a very, very peaceful, happy one, because the kids were just brilliant, you know, and Gail was doing an amazing job. And that was snow, just coming on in leaps and bounds, thankfully. And that was Gail then, who, you know, for a young lad, taking on the responsibility of all those kids is unbelievable, and he's still firing on and doing it. And now I no longer run the charity that I set up, because we achieved everything we set out to achieve, and the orphanage is self-sustaining, it runs itself. And our pet now, he's been to university, he now works at the orphanage. You find a lot of them go out, get their qualifications, earn a bit of money, and then they all want to go back to the orphanage to work to help the younger kids, because they know how they feel being in an orphanage, they've been there. So yeah, I get into photography in a big way once I come out of the police force, living life to the full. I can do what the heck I like. I don't have to answer to anyone, and I don't have to get into that blooming cold water anymore. And then 2 years ago, we moved over here and got my 2 Muppets and my photography. We live over near Abernethy. This has gone, graduating at Bangkok University with a honours degree for his music, and he plays regularly, night after night, in various bands. He works with the television industry out there, the film industry, doing incredibly well. He's a drummer and guitarist and sings. He's just amazing. Rajana would have been so pleased, because that's Tom Palmer, her daughter, who graduated last year, and that's Game, representing her as her dad, if you like. And that's little Snow, doing really, really well, and fortunately no scars from what happened to her, and they will never ever tell her where she came from because of the way she was found, you know. So a beautiful little girl, and so that's the story of the orphanage.
Wow.
So any questions at all, I'd be more than happy to.
Perfect time. Gill, you didn't rattle. I mean, we were in awe of all of this, really in awe, because each step that you go along, you don't expect there to be something more, and there was. And how on earth did you decompress after your first 3 trips?
I was going to say after the dive. Well, after the first one, there were 15 of us, and it was full on working with dead bodies.
Yeah.
We ended up having to identify 4,606 bodies between both sites. And the worst thing for all of us was the smell. We used to get back to the hotel in complete disgust, because your clothing, your skin reeked with dead bodies. And you'd look along the corridor, and everyone would be just stripping off at the door and legging it in, and embarrassingly putting stuff in bags for the laundry girls to come and clear. But when we got back, we had what they call a hot debrief at Heathrow Airport, and we were taken to this room where Lawrence Dallaglio had just turned up with his broken ankle from the Lions tour in New Zealand. And I was more interested in Lawrence Dallaglio. But we had a quick debrief there, and then they said, right, you all need to go for a psychological assessment at this place in just outside Oxford. And you know, because what I did, I buddied everybody off in Thailand, so that they had someone to bounce things off, and then I had a partner as well that I could bounce things off, and vice versa. So and we had a debrief every day on there, and then, you know, it was really good stuff, and it was a brilliant team. And so when I said, look, they want us to go for this thing, and we don't need to do that, I said, there's a good dinner to be had. They go, yeah, all right. So we all went down. But the thing is, there was the psychiatrist was basically saying, and do you find yourself getting upset? Do you find, okay, no, we were so, I'd say pleased to be able to at last put skills that you've been taught into place and use them to the benefit of other people, because we were taught to deal with chemical, biological, nuclear war and everything, but I thought, well, in my time in the police therapy, I'm never going to use that. And lots of skills we had, we knew you were never going to use them, but you had them in your toolbox.
Yeah.
But this one,
Yeah.
you could put everything together and it worked perfectly.
It must have been some joy to see the children, see them flourishing in that orphanage.
Oh, absolutely, and even now, we keep in touch with them, and as I say, even though I no longer run the orphanage, I run the charity. If they need anything, they know that, and we speak to them, and we get Facebook messages through, and and all sorts of things. So we're always in touch with them, and we'll always help them if they need anything. And just as an aside, I've got a book there, which is more or less what I told you today. But every penny of that goes to the kids as well, so it's not for me, it's for them. So I didn't want to write a book. But,
I would strongly recommend reading it. It's just amazing. I'm sure there are questions. Don't be shy. Yeah.
Just you said that the orphanage is now self-sustaining.
Yeah.
So how does it generate the income to make it self-sustaining? Does it get government grants or is it, how's it funded?
Okay, well, the Australian charity still gives them money for wages for the staff, first of all, which is good. So it's not entirely self-sustaining, but because they help them with that. However, they have a craft shop on board. They've got hairdressers on board and a coffee shop, which they all have to run. And it's in a big tourist area, and so they make money from the tourists basically. The girls will go into hotels and do Thai dancing. It's properly organised. It's not shady or anything. It's all, and again, it's donations. They get visits from organised. The hotels are very, very switched on to this because they've all grown up from the tsunami around them, and they want to support their local kids as much as possible. So the hotels get the kids involved as much as possible because they know that tourists will give loads of money for them, but it's all very, very strictly controlled, and I had to give a talk to the older girls about the sex predators in clubs and street corners and things, and just saying, look, you really don't want kids. And Rajana said that the best advice, the best way she has dealt with sort of preventing pregnancies with the girls was whenever there were new babies brought in, she would give a baby to one of the young girls and say, you're looking after that for 2 weeks. So it's not thinking about, having babies or anything. So yeah, but they also, we provided the hydroponics, and so they grow all these vegetables, and the vegetables are sold to hotels as well. They've got a big carp fishery there, and they sell fish. But ornamental fish, not for eating. And so there's lots of things like that, and the government now, the government it took until COVID for the government to step in really, and then the government kept on supporting them, which is good. So yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
If there was another tsunami, would it have the same devastating consequences?
Probably with the buildings, yeah, because the buildings have just been built up again in the areas where it's all flooded. However, they've now got really, really good tsunami warning systems in place all the way along the coastline now. These huge, great big structures and alarms and things. There's signs everywhere, and so you'd like to think that there would be enough time for the people to get to a place of sanctuary before the waves hit them. So yes, there would be structural damage and property damage, but we'd like to think that not as many people would be killed.
Did you conclude that any of the bodies you looked at were sort of opportunistic murders that
No.
people had? No.
No, not at all. There was a body mix-up. There was a body released to the wrong family. That was a British body as well, and they were trying to rush it through for someone important. This is before we went out there, and they got back to the UK and discovered that it was the wrong body. So I had to go all the way out and get the right body. But no, all of the post-mortems and things just show terrible destruction to the bodies. Yeah. Nothing suspicious.
Well, I think that's given us a lot to think about, a lot to sleep on. Gill, really amazing. Congratulations.
Can I just say three final points? One, if you were here for the Alex Moran talk, we took a donation for his cause. I'll put a plate out if anybody wants to contribute towards Hands Across the Water, then please feel free to do that and make sure that Jill gets that. And just two final things. If you want to be on the mailing list for the talks coming up, just pop your name on this bit of paper out on the desk. And if you are fit and able to do so, it'd be great to have a wee hand stuck in the chairs. But it's just absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Keep going now.
Yeah.